Thanks, James. Hi, everyone. Yeah, as James said, Tom Raftery, work for Redmonk. I think I'm right, James, in saying I'm the only Redmonk that's spoken at a ThingMonk event, and I've spoken at all three. I think I'm the only person who's spoken at all three ThingMonk events as well. My details are there. Get in touch anytime. My phone number is there. Please don't call it now because I'm using the phone as a slide projector or as a slide forwarder. The structure of this talk, I've got 94 slides in about 15 minutes, so I've got to rip through them as fast as I can. But I'll be talking about IoT very briefly. I've got some bad news, I'm afraid, and then we'll be getting on to the good news to end on a high. So, cracking on. IoT, we all know what it is. It has its roots kind of in machine to machine. Everything is connected. Even down to watches are connected. This is a graph from my Fitbit of my pulse on the 12th of November when I was giving a talk at TechEd in Barcelona. And you can see right there is when I was giving the talk when the pulse went up to about 150. So everything is connected. Cisco tell us that we're going to have about 50 billion devices connected in 2020. And that's just a put your finger in the air, pick a number kind of thing. But it talks to 25 billion today to 50. So we're talking about a doubling of things being connected in the next 5 years. And as I say, that's just a pluck a figure out of the air. Who knows? But everything is going to be connected. So what? So what? We'll come back to that because I said bad news. Okay, so we've got some bad news to go through first, I'm afraid, and it's pretty bad news. I've got three numbers here I want you to try and remember. The three numbers are 2, 565 and 2795, and we'll talk about each of those individually. The first is 2 degrees centigrade. What's that? That is the temperature we've decided we want to cap global warming at, 2 degrees C. 167 countries signed up to this in the Copenhagen Climate Agreement in 2009. The next number, 565, what's that? That's the number of gigatons of CO2 that we have to emit to reach 2 degrees centigrade. And if you don't know what a gigaton is, it's 1 billion tons of CO2. So we've got to emit 565 billion tons of CO2 into the atmosphere to reach 2 degrees centigrade. So that's our carbon budget. Now, to put that in a bit of context, we typically emit as a planet about 50 gigatons of CO2 per annum. So that would say we've about 11 years left, but in fact, natural processes in the planet reabsorb about 25 of those. So that gives us 20 to 30 years at current rates. The last figure, the 2795, that is the proven reserves of CO2 of the fossil fuel companies and countries. So the proven reserves are the amount of CO2 that these companies and countries have in the ground that it's in their interest to dig up and pump into the air. This is why Saudi Arabia is not cutting back on its production despite oil being at about $40 a barrel. It's because they know that 565 figure and they want as many of those 565 gigatons to be Saudi gigatons as possible. So they're getting as much out while they still can. So there's one more number that I want you to remember. I lied about the three numbers, I'm sorry. And the number is 400. And what's that? Well, 400 is the parts per million of CO2 that we are at currently. This is the Keeling curve. It's the graph of CO2 in the atmosphere, and it's kind of got a sawtooth effect because every year it goes up and down. But you can see the graph is bottom left to top right, which is great if it's a sales chart, but unfortunately this is a graph of pollution and it's going the wrong way entirely. We've gone over 400 parts per million. The first time we went above 400 parts per million was on the 9th of May 2013. We stayed above 400 parts per million for a couple of days. Then in 2014 we stayed above 400 parts per million for 3 months. This year, 2015, we went above 400 parts per million for 6 months. And we've gone back over it again in the last couple of days. In fact, the 11th of November, we went above 400 parts per million again. And because of the El Nino, next year's dip, if I go back one, if I can go back one, doesn't want to go back. Yeah. So next year's dip, that's the dip last year, that's the dip this year. Next year's dip is going to be above the green line. So the 400 parts per million figure, the 11th of November was the last time in history that we were below 400 parts per million. We will never again go below 400 parts per million. This is a graph of thousands of years ago, so 800,000 years ago, 400,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, and this line on the very right is where we are today with the 400 parts per million at the top. So that leads to this. These colored lines here are the temperature of the last 6 hottest years in history, the record years, record temperatures. The black line on top is this year, 2015. So we are in deep shit. So this is serious facepalm time. But we've got some good news. So it's not all bad, thankfully. Good news, first bit of good news, and there's a lot of good news to come. First bit of good news is, this is from the EPA. And sorry, these slides will be up in SlideShare, and all of these slides have a reference link at the bottom, which is a clickable link. When it's up in SlideShare, it'll be a clickable link. You can go and you can see the data. This is the EPA's chart of where emissions come from. And the EPA says that 38% of emissions are from electricity and 32% are from transportation. So that means just with those two alone, we've got a lever potentially on 70% of emissions because transportation is starting to go electric. And it's tending that way, not just for cars like this Tesla, but this is the London bus fleet. They've bought 300 electric buses from BYD, the Chinese company. These buses, they charge in 4 hours overnight, and they then go for the entire day the following day. This is BMW's electric truck. They're starting to produce these. Initially, they're using them just for themselves, but they're going to become a product. The train service in the Netherlands is all electric, and by 2018, it's going to be 100% renewably sourced. We're getting some work in shipping going electric as well. This is a photovoltaic ship. We're getting some happening in the airline industry as well. This is the Airbus E-Fan, and the Airbus E-Fan this summer crossed the English Channel in 36 minutes, I think it was. And they're turning that, this is a prototype, the one that crossed the channel, but they're turning it into a production vehicle to go on sale in 2017, 2-seater and 4-seater versions. So when you get Airbus coming on board manufacturing electric planes, you know it's going to start to be a thing. So that's transportation. The other thing I mentioned is electricity, the other lever we have. And electricity systems, I don't know how familiar you are with this, but they are dumb. They are incredibly dumb. Typically, if you get an outage, if an area goes dark on a grid, typically the utility company hears of it is when the phone calls start coming in. And the first thing the electricity company does is they say, okay, where are you? So this is how they figure out where the outage is. And then, you know, when they get a group of people saying, yeah, we're out and we're in this area, then they send a truck roll. And the first truck roll is to find what the problem is, so they can ring back and say, yeah, the problem is this. So then they can send out the second truck roll of specialists with, whether it's vegetation management or whatever, to manage trees or poles or whatever. Then they fix the problem. So electricity is dumb. It's getting better. It's getting a lot better. We're getting a lot of digitization now on the network, which is good. Electricity is buggy, as we know. It's typically read-only. It's not publish and subscribe. You can't generally, although this is changing too, you can't generally push electricity onto the grid unless you're a generator, or unless you start doing a bit of solar yourself. And this is becoming more common, but typically the system is designed for read-only. It provisions for hits, as James referred to in the intro. Basically, where I live in Seville in the south of Spain, the hottest days are July and August, and mid-afternoon is the time when the most energy is being consumed in August. Here it's probably Christmas week. Christmas week, everyone has the Christmas lights on, it's cold, everyone goes home from work, 6 o'clock in the evening, say, turn on the lights, turn on the oven. So those kinds of times here, Christmas week, in Seville, August, these are the peak loads. And those peak loads happen 2-3 weeks in the year, and electricity companies have to build power plants that only work 2 or 3 weeks in the year, and they cost millions to make. to hit those times to make sure they don't have outages. And it makes absolutely no sense. So we got to find a way to fix that, and that's what we're going to be talking about. So renewables are a big part of the answer, and for the electricity companies, they're often seen as a bit of a bogeyman, and they're seen as a bit of a bogeyman because they're variable generators. You know, the sun comes out, you get the solar producing, a cloud goes over the sun, the generation dips a bit, the wind blows, the wind turbine starts spinning. So this is a chart of typical demand on the Spanish system. Daily demand is the big graph, and weekly demand is the small graph to the bottom. You can see the demand is variable, but it's predictable. It's the same shape each day of the week, except on the weekends when it drops a bit, but it's the same pattern. However, this is wind production on the same day, and it's all over the place. So it's very difficult for utility companies to deal with this. This, for example, is the 9th of July this year in Denmark. They had 140% of their generation, 140% of their demand come from wind alone. So obviously if they have 140% of the demand, they can't stick it in a box and put it on a shelf. They have to ship it out. Luckily they have good interconnects with their neighbours, and they're able to sell it out because they're not just producing from wind, they also are producing from the solar cells, from combined heat and power, and from central power stations. So you've got to have interconnects in place, you've got to have good networks, but you've also got to have, as part of the solution, storage, and we'll come to storage in a second. This is probably one of the more interesting graphs you will see today, or at least in this presentation. This is called the Swanson effect. And the Swanson effect is Moore's law for solar. And what it says is that for every doubling of installed capacity, the price of solar drops 20%. So you can see price in 77 was up at $76 per kilowatt hour, dropping to 74 cents in 2013. And the price is continuing to go down. And what that brings about is this nice effect here, this beautiful virtuous circle, where this is the same Swanson effect graph, but over here, what you've got is the installed capacity in blue. So as the price drops, it hits a beautiful inflection point here, and that causes the amount of installed capacity to start flying up, which of course, because installed capacity is part of the Swanson effect, the more the installed capacity goes up, the more the price comes down, and the more the price comes down, it becomes more attractive, more people buy it, installed capacity goes up, and price goes down. So this is continuing, and it's continuing to drive things like this. Record pricing in Dubai. This was a deal done last year. Aqua Power out of Riyadh sold a 25-year power purchase agreement into DEWA of Dubai at 5.84 cents per kilowatt hour for 25 years. Now, why that is really important is that Dubai generates 99% of its power from burning gas. And it costs them 9 cents per kilowatt hour to burn gas. Now they can get solar at 5.84 cents per kilowatt hour. Solar is making a huge difference. And of course, this deal was for 200 megawatts of installed capacity in a park that's rated for a gigawatt. So they got another 800 to build out. And the winning bidders said, we'll do the full 1 gigawatt for you at 5.4 cents per kilowatt hour. And DEWA said, no, we'll hang on another year or two until the price drops some more. Because it will, because they know it will. China has said they're going to roll out 70 gigawatts of solar in the next 2 years. Now, just to put that in context, a gigawatt is a nuclear power plant. So China are building 70 nuclear power plants worth of solar in the next 2 years. It's unheard of. You couldn't do it with nuclear. Nuclear doesn't scale. A nuclear power plant is a 7 to 10 year project. India are rolling out 110 gigawatts, or 100 gigawatts, sorry, of solar in the next 7 years, between now and 2022. So again, you've got the Swanson effect. That's 170 gigawatts between those two countries alone. India have announced as well, new power plants, got a bit off track. The renewable energy made up half of the world's new power plants in 2014, according to the EIA. So renewables are really, really taking off. And India has announced just this week at the Paris Climate Conference that they've come together with 120 countries to build a solar alliance. So they're going to help each other build out more and more solar. Solar energy costs are continuing to plunge according to other reports, and you can see the projections in green there for solar costs for the next 25 years. It's just going down and down and down. Storage as well. We're seeing lots of storage both on the utility scale storage and also on the residential storage, with Tesla launching their Powerwall. The Powerwall is a 7 or 10 kilowatt hour battery which sells for about $3,000. You can install it at home. They're stackable, so you can put them side by side and have 14, 20, whatever it is, of the storage that you want. We're getting lots of research in storage, which means that you're getting all kinds of headlines like this coming out day after day, week after week, leading to things like this. This is a chart of energy density of lithium-ion cells, and it's going up and to the right, which this time is a good thing. The batteries are becoming more energy dense. They can store more energy. You can drive your electric car further, and the price of those batteries is coming down. Watch the black line. That's the average. The price is coming down year after year after year. So storage is getting more energy dense and getting cheaper. And this is the result of that. This is a chart of sales of storage Q3 2013, Q3 2014, Q3 2015. And this year, the report forecasts total deployments of triple last year's total, basically. So storage is being sold more and more and more. And we've got things like the Tesla Gigafactory, which, if you haven't heard of it, is pretty amazing. This is a factory for building storage for batteries for Tesla and for their customers. Their battery is the biggest battery plant in the world. It's rated to produce 35 gigawatt hours of storage per annum, which, if that doesn't mean anything to you, the total production of storage globally in 2013 was 30 gigawatt hours. So this factory is going to more than double it in one factory. And this factory is going to start producing batteries this quarter. What that does is, through just economies of scale, they reckon it's going to reduce the battery costs by another 30%. So battery costs are coming down. And finally, we get on to IoT. Sorry, it's taken a bit of a while, but I needed a bit of a backstory. The typical use cases for IoT that you see talked about in the energy space are for things like this: predictive maintenance. And predictive maintenance is good, it's important. Make sure that the machines stay running and are efficient, but it's not really the interesting one. It's kind of the boring one that's used all the time. What I think is a lot more interesting is to talk about things like demand management. And the reason we want to talk about demand management is because that's where we allow more renewables onto the system. Remember, renewables are variable generators, so we want to try and match the demand to the supply so that we even out the instabilities. Now, not all loads are movable, and I'll come on to that. One of the reasons we can do this is because we have connectivity now on the high voltage side, on the medium voltage side, and behind the meter in the home. Everything, remember, I said everything is starting to be connected, which means we get applications like this which allow us to control our lighting, control our TV, control our fridges, our washing machines, etc., etc., etc. We need to turn energy into a marketplace. What's not obvious to a lot of people is this price of electricity can change by an order of magnitude within a 24-hour period on the wholesale market. But we're not exposed to this. We never see it. It changes in price as the supply fluctuates. We should expose this pricing to our devices because we want to do this demand flexibility. The green line here is if you flatten the demand by pushing this demand over to this side. So this is during the day, the peak, and we want to shift a lot of that demand to nighttime when there's little demand. There are already protocols and devices in place which can do this. This is a Whirlpool washing machine. It has a smart grid mode. They're not very common yet. This is ice bank air conditioning. Again, not very common. But the ice bank air conditioners are a nice idea. What they do is they suck in energy at nighttime, create ice, and use that to chill your buildings during the day. We've got some nice protocols and standards starting to emerge now. So this is OpenADR, coming out of the Electric Power Research Institute in the US. And OpenADR is an open automated demand response protocol. It's open. There's another one, though, which is even more interesting, I think. And it's this group called the Flexible Power Alliance Network. And it's a grouping of people like Accenture, Alliander, who are a big utility company in the Netherlands, CGI, and a couple of other big organizations like that. What it is it's a software called, they've produced a software called the Power Matcher Suite, which is open source software. It's Apache 2 licensed. That's it there on GitHub. And you can see the link there, that's a clickable link to their software on GitHub. And what does it do? Well, I had a demo of that software given to me by one of the Alliander executives when I was in Vienna a couple of weeks back at a utility event. And what he had on the stand at the event was this nice little microgrid. On this side here, we have some solar panels. Here we have some battery storage. Here we have a wind turbine. Here we have a monitor showing real-time pricing of the electricity. And here we have a string of LEDs. And I'll just run, this is a quick video, and I'll explain what happens. Hopefully the video will run. Or not. Okay, that didn't work. Damn it. When the video does work, what happens is the guy covers the solar panels with a piece of paper, and as he does that, the LEDs scale back their consumption. Sorry. The LEDs scale back their consumption, so a lot of the LEDs drop their consumption here. There's a string of LEDs going along here. They drop as he covers the solar panels, and at the same time, the price goes up on the monitor. And then when he takes the paper off, the LEDs light up again, the price drops. Then he turns on the wind turbine, the price drops to 0, all the LEDs light up, and the batteries start sucking in power. And it all happens independently because the software, as I say, it's agent-based software, so it scales incredibly well. It's agent-based software written in Java and OSGI. So each device there has its own intelligence and responds independently to the pricing signals. So this kind of stuff could be built into the home, into home appliances or commercial appliances, where you have every device on your network listening for power signals, listening for pricing signals and adjusting their behavior accordingly. And one advantage of your devices subscribing to pricing and sucking in cheaper electricity is greener. And this is kind of counterintuitive. Most people, when they think cheap electricity, they think coal and they think dirty electricity. But in fact, on the wholesale markets, as the price drops, the fossil fuel generators drop out of the market because they've got fixed costs around fuel, which the renewables don't have. So in any wholesale market, as the price falls, the fossil fuel companies drop out of the market and the percentage of renewables in the mix as a result increases. Because the renewables are price takers. They'll take any price. As long as they're being given money, they'll say, yeah, keep giving it to me. So as you're selecting for cheaper electricity, you're selecting for electricity with a higher renewable content. There's a lot of disruption coming in this market. I was on a call last week with the EU Commission, and we were talking about this kind of stuff, and I put it to them that because the price of generation is falling, where we're going to is we're going to a place where all electricity is pretty much free. It's like a landline. You pay 20 euros a month, 30 euros a month, whatever it is, for as much electricity as you want. And then they layer services on top of that, and you pay for those. So that's the kind of market we're heading to. We're going to get new business models emerging. Things like vehicle to grid. Because Tesla, for example, their typical car has between a 70 kilowatt hour to a 90 kilowatt hour battery. They say they want to sell 500,000 of their cars per annum by 2020. Now, if we go a little conservative on this and we say low-end battery, 70 kilowatt hours, say they sell 250,000 of those, that's 17.5 gigawatt hours of storage they're selling a year. And they are in touch with each of those cars. So I can imagine a situation where Tesla say, well, you own a 70 kilowatt hour battery. If you allow us to trade your energy for you, we'll do a rev share model on that. So we'll sell your energy during the day as you're not using it. We'll make sure it's got enough to get you home at the end of the day, or we'll do it overnight. Anytime electricity is needed, we'll sell some of yours and we'll give you a share of it. The other kinds of services you can imagine, and there's all kinds of models out there. This is a picture of my dad that I took on his 80th birthday. And he lives in Ireland. I live in Spain. My mother's dead, and my sister lives in Dallas, in Texas. So I'm the closest. Now, if the electricity company said to me, Tom, give us €5 a month, and we'll send you a message if your dad's light doesn't go off at 11 o'clock at night, or if the kettle isn't turned on at 8 o'clock in the morning, would I pay that €5? Absolutely. You can imagine all kinds of cases like that. If you had a second home, would you want to get a message if the lights went on and you weren't there? Or if the power went out and you had stuff in the fridge? Absolutely. So there's all kinds of things that you can dream up that's going to be made possible by this. Who's going to be the Uber of electricity? Could be any of you guys. The standards, the open source stuff, it's all there. All it needs is a couple of good, clever ideas. We saw this week as well the Breakthrough Energy Coalition. This was an announcement, again, coming from time to coincide with Paris, the climate conference in Paris. If you haven't heard of the Breakthrough Energy Coalition, this is a coalition of some of the richest people in the world, the real oligarchs, the George Soroses, the Bill Gates, the Vinod Khosla, you name the billionaire, they're in this coalition, and they're there to bring out new sources of energy. The only ones that are not there that I can think of are the Koch brothers, for obvious reasons. And also we're seeing countries pledging 20 billion for green energy research. This is an awesome time to be in energy. We've got the money, we've got the connectivity, and we've got the standards, the open standards to do all this. So, in conclusion, and sorry for running a bit over, Fintan, IoT is here, solar and storage are transformative, and there's a whole bunch of opportunities out there. Go for it, folks.